Hi, my name is Rolf Sloeman, and in this video you will learn how to build your first app in Xcode, the development environment for your Mac that you can use to build apps for your iPhone, iPad, and even for OS X. Now, before we start, I'd just like to apologize first for my accent. As you've probably noticed already, I'm not a native American speaker. I'm from the Netherlands, but I'll try and do my best to make myself as understandable as possible. I'm the founder of the App Builders Academy, and over here in Europe, we've already helped thousands of people just like yourself who had no previous experience in either programming, coding apps or whatsoever to build apps, and loads of those people already have their own apps in the App Store. So if you are actually trying to find out if building apps is something you want to do, this might be the video you're looking for. Because in the next 45 minutes or so, I'm going to show you what it takes to build your very first app. Now, the only thing you actually need to work with me on this video is a Mac, because Xcode is Mac only. And although there's solutions such as VirtualBox to use Windows to run Mac apps, that is not something I would really advise. So you do need a Mac to work with me on this video. And the good news is Xcode is free. It's an app that you can download from the App Store, as you see here. Here on the right, you have this option, App Development, and if you select that option, you'll see a number of apps, and the first one, as you might have expected, is Xcode. So you can download it for free. It's a huge download, so take some time. Download it, and once you've installed it, you'll see this screen, once you've launched Xcode, that is. And this screen is the screen you will use to start building your very first project, because that's the way this all works in Xcode. Every app you will be building has its own project. So we'll start by doing just that, building a new Xcode project. And since this is our first app, we are going to call it First App. The first screen you'll see is this one, and this might already start to look pretty confusing, but it's not that difficult, particularly if you know that you'll only need one or maybe two options of the screen every time you want to build a new app. As you can see, you can build apps for either iOS or for OS X, which we'll be ignoring in this video. We'll be focusing on iOS. And then you see three options: application, framework and library, and other. We need this one. We're going to build an application. And then you see you have 5 more options. Why all these options? Well, it's actually pretty simple. Xcode will prepare a lot of files for you already. So you have something to start with. You're not really starting with a clean slate. So you don't need to write all the program code. Xcode will already do a lot of work for you. And this is the one basic template that you'll be using most often when you start building your own apps. This is a so-called single view application. Don't worry if you don't know what the words single view mean. You'll be clear about this by the end of this video, I promise you that. But this is the, let's call it this way, the best starting template. Quick and simple, as you will see. Once you press next, you'll be presented with this screen. And this is also one of those screens that a lot of people find pretty confusing. Let's start with the product name. That's the name of your app. Basically the name that will be displayed in the screen, or on the screen of the people who will be using your app on your iPhone or iPad, or in our case, on the simulator. Because Xcode, this programming development, this integrated development environment, as they call it, contains a simulator which allows you to run apps without even having an iPhone or iPad. You can do it all on your Mac. So there's no need to have a real iPhone or iPad. In this video, we will be using that simulator. And on the home screen of either the simulator or your iPhone, you will see a name linked to your app. That's the name we're going to enter here. So let's call our app First App. Now, this organization name, you don't really need that. You can leave it blank if you want. As you see, I've entered the name of the App Builders Academy. A nice website, small plug, where you can learn how to build apps. And the name of your product, together with the name of your organization, create this so-called organization identifier. And this name you can change as well. You can put anything here you want. You see it's kind of a reverse domain name, right? Com first and then the App Builders Academy. If you have no domain name at all, if you're just someone who's trying to start with all this, you can enter it in, change it into your last name. For instance, you can do something like this, or in my case, it would be something like this. But for now, we're just going to take what it says in the first place. com.app-builders academy. You see what Xcode does? It also enters it adds the name of our product. Now, this bundle identifier, which is composed on the next line, as you see, which you can't change, is actually a unique code. Every app on your iPhone, and even every app in the App Store, has a unique bundle identifier. There can't be two apps on your iPhone with the same bundle identifier. There can't even be two apps in the App Store with the same identifier, because this is the unique thing that differentiates one app from the other. So this is created for you by Xcode based on what you enter here and what you enter over here. Then language. If you have just installed Xcode, it could be that it says Objective-C. I would like you to change that into Swift, and the reason is the following. When it all started a few years ago, when people were allowed by Apple to build apps for iPhone and iPad, the language to use was Objective-C, this language. Objective-C is basically an extra layer on another language called C, which is a pretty complicated language, which is pretty prone to bugs and a lot of program crashes. And last year, in October 2014, Apple introduced Swift, a completely new programming language which is very safe and secure. It's also very compact. It's also very easy to learn. And the combination of those three things, safety, compactness, and ease of use, makes it possible to build apps, really powerful apps, in pretty little amount of programming code. You'll be amazed what you can do in a few lines of Swift code. And taking into account that it's pretty easy to learn Swift, it's absolutely the language of choice if you have never programmed before. And the interesting part is, once you know how to write your own apps in Swift, it's very easy to learn other programming languages. It's a very easy platform to start with, and it's a very easy language to use as a platform for learning new programming languages. So change this to Swift. Devices, there's three options there. You can choose to create an app for your iPad, for iPhone, or a so-called universal app which runs on both platforms, where all platforms have their own screens. For now, let's stick with iPhone, so iPhone is the device to use. This we can leave switched off. We are not going to use that in this example. Now we have to find a place where to put our project files, because as you will see in a few moments, Xcode will build a lot of project files for only this app. This, by the way, you can leave this switched off. It might be switched on if you just installed Xcode. And just switch it off for now and click Create. And then it will create all the project files on our desktop. And now don't get alarmed by the complexity of this screen, because it's huge. It's a lot of stuff over there. Let's start with those project files. You see them here already. This is what Xcode created when you asked it to build an app based on that single view app template. A lot of files. You don't need all of them. Basically, in this example, in this video, we are only going to use two of them. We're going to focus on the storyboard, and we are going to focus on this viewcontroller.swift file. This file will contain program code, as you will see a little bit later. And this is where we will design our app. Well, we will put elements over there like buttons and labels and all that stuff. You do all that on the storyboard without writing even one single letter of programming code. The program code, we'll do that later, will code in this file as said, the .swift file. And the interesting thing is, even though we haven't done anything yet, we've only created an app. This is an app which is actually ready to run, and you can start that app by pressing this play button over here. There's two more ways to do this, but let's start with the play button first. Once you click on it, Xcode will start building the app, as you see here, and in a few moments you'll see the simulator in action. This is part of Xcode. This is actually an iPhone. It's a simulated iPhone. It's not a real iPhone, as you can see, but you can use it to build apps test them, and do everything you would expect to do with a normal iPhone. You can even shake the screen, for instance, and you can turn the screen around. There's all kinds of shortcuts to do that. For instance, if you press Command right arrow, you'll see we've turned the screen into landscape mode, and Command left arrow you'll use to turn the screen back. You can also do that with options here. And as you can see, there's also options here to get to the home screen, for instance, Command Shift H. If I press Command Shift H right now, you'll get to the home screen. You see, this is just like a regular app, and using the mouse, I can drag from screen to screen. And look, here's our app. Here's another one, by the way, one I built a little bit earlier when I tested my system for creating this video. But this is the app we've just built, and you can start it here again, and by pressing Control Shift Home, you return to the home screen. Enough said, we'll get back to that simulator a little bit later. And you saw just a white screen, that's all. That's what Xcode has now built for us. And now it's up to us to change this app. And we'll do that by starting to change the screen. And as said, everything that has to do with the visual stuff, the objects, you do that with the storyboard. This is the storyboard. It's now being displayed over here in the editor part of Xcode. This is where you do everything that has to do with the design of your app. It might be your version of Xcode that you don't see this. You can hide and show this outline, as it's called, by clicking on this icon over here. Or you can select an option here in the editor menu where it says Show Document Outline. And this outline, you can open it by expanding it by clicking on this triangle, shows you everything that this view controller, another new word, we'll get back to it a little bit later in this video, contains. So you see mystical words like top layout guide, bottom layout guide, view, first responder, exit, and storyboard entry point. Now a storyboard, just like in the movies, basically tells the story of your app, where it all starts. You can see that here, the entry point. This is the first thing that will be shown. And as you can understand, you might have many more screens. An app often has more than one screen. And in this storyboard, you create all those screens. In this video, we'll be using only one screen, this one. And every screen has a controller, a view controller, because in Apple jargon, you call those screens views. And the interesting thing is, as you'll be seeing later in this video, every view can have additional views. For instance, buttons, labels, images, all those things are views put into a main view. This is the main view. And what we'll be doing right now, you see, I just clicked here in the outline to select the main view. I could also have clicked here to select it, just the same thing, although it doesn't turn blue, interestingly enough. Now we have this main view selected, which you can see here as well. We are able to change specific properties of that view. For instance, its background color. It's now white, which is the default, but we can change it to any color. For instance, I can click on other, and I can say I'd rather like to have a yellow background. You see, it changes here immediately in the storyboard. And to see whether or not it actually changed in our app as well, we can simply build it again. Now, I've already showed you one way to build. You can click on this play button. The other option is to select the build option here, or sorry, the run option here from the product menu. And as you see, this run option has its own shortcut, Command R. And I have to be honest, I always teach people to use shortcuts as often as possible. Not all of them, because Xcode alone, I think there's about 100 of them. You don't need to learn all of those by heart. But if you learn 9, maybe 10 shortcuts, you'll save yourself lots and lots of time when you're developing apps. And one of the shortcuts you definitely need to know is Command R to run your app. And the other one is Command full stop, Command period, to stop it. So you can see them here in the product menu as well. Run to start, and stopping is here with Command period. So for now, let's start our app with a new background color, the yellow background color, by pressing Command R. Xcode will build the whole app again, and the simulator will be started again, and you see we now have a yellow screen. So actually, Xcode registered the change we made here in the storyboard and created an app with a yellow screen as a result. What we're going to do right now is going to put some stuff on this screen to make it more interesting. Let's start with a label. A label is used in Xcode and in iOS to place text on your screen. And you can do that all using program code, but why would you, since we can use the storyboard to do it by clicking and dragging. Over here on the right, you see this utility pane. By the way, here on the left, you see another pane called the navigator. And using those two panes, you can navigate your way around through all the options that Xcode has to offer. And let's start with this utility pane here on the right. If you don't see that pane, by the way, you can switch it on and off by using those three options here in the toolbar. This button here is to hide or show the utilities pane. This one is to hide and show the navigator, the one here on the left. And there's another one here, which is now switched off. You use that one to hide or show the debugging pane, which is then to be put here at the bottom side of your Xcode screen. We'll get to that, not in this video probably, but in other videos you'll see me use it time and time again. You use that to find errors in your app and fix those errors. So you can switch off the utilities pane or switch it back on. If you need more room in your editor, you can do the same with the navigator pane as you see here. And as you might have guessed, there's also shortcuts to do this. And those are two more shortcuts that I actually really advise you to use. And both of the shortcuts use numbers, use digits. The digit to use is the 0. Now if you want to switch on the navigation pane, the pane here on the left, you press Command 0. It's that easy. If you want to switch it off again, you press Command 0. If you want to switch off the utilities pane on the right, you use Command Alt 0, or if you have an older keyboard, Command Option 0. There it is, and now it's gone again. So Command 0 to open the navigation pane and close it again, and Command Alt 0 to open and close the utilities pane. This pane you use to change stuff. And this pane, the navigation pane, you use to select specific things. For instance, a file in your app, like the storyboard, or a symbol, which we won't go into right now in your app, or an error, because in a later stage you will see errors once you start building your own apps. You can use this one, the issues navigator, to switch from one arrow to the other. Right now there are no issues, so there's nothing displayed here, but you can have all those issues displayed here, and then by clicking on them you can very quickly go to a specific pain point somewhere in your app. But for now we'll stick to the file navigator, the first one, and just a little note on the side, you can actually switch to those ones as well with your keyboard very quickly. You remember the digits, right? The 0 was to switch it off and on, like here, like this. You can also use the 1 to switch to the file navigator, which is the one displayed right now. The 2, so Command 2 to switch to the next one. 3, 4, well, you probably get the drift by now. So let's switch to the first one, Command 1, and you get back to the file one. And similarly here on the right, you can do the same thing. You might remember that with Command Alt 0, you switch the utilities pane off and on. And with Command Alt 1, you switch to the first one over there, the second one, the third one, the fourth one, and so forth. Okay, the ones you'll be using most often are the third, fourth, and fifth one, by the way. With the third one over here, you can actually look and change things which have to do with the identity of one of those things over here. We're not going to do it today, but with this one, you can change properties, specific settings for a view. Right now we only have one view, this background view. But as said, we're going to add another view, a label. As said, everything put on a screen is a view, everything. And a typical iPhone app has dozens of views, maybe even hundreds of them. You can create them using program code, and you can create them like we're going to do right now using this storyboard. Views are listed over here, but you don't see them here yet. There's 4 options here, and the views are listed in, I think it's this one. Yeah, the third one. This is the one, in my own environment, this is the one I've always switched off on. I've almost never used the other ones, just these ones. Here are all the views and stuff that is related to views that you can drag to your storyboard. And as you remember, we were looking for a label. Here it is, a label view. And look what happens. I'll make some more screen room, so I'll switch off the navigator pane for now by pressing Command 0. There we go. Look at what happens. I'll just drag a label over here with my left mouse button pressed to the screen. And look, I'll just kind of drop it for now somewhere. Look what happens here in the outline. You see this? Once again, if you don't see the outline, just press this button over here. And there it is, and there it goes again. Where is it? There you go. You see, something happened here. The word label appeared. And you see, because it's actually indented, that the label is a part of this view. We call that a subview. Technical word, but it basically means that the label is now a subview of this view. And this view is also called, because it's the first view, it's the main view of this thing, this view controller, this screen. So here we have our label. You see, I just put it somewhere. You see, I can drag it, can put it wherever I want. Can even change the text on it, can do whatever I want. Hello all, there you go. Now I have an hello all label. I can also change the text here, because look what happened over here. When we selected our first view, the main view, like this, you can also select it by clicking this, but then it gets this nasty blue shadow. You can also select it like this. I got these options to change. You see the background color, alpha values, tint. We're not going to bother with all of these right now, but those are a number of the properties that we can change. Now this label is also a view. It's a specific kind of view. It's a special view. That's why those view options we had a few seconds ago now get put here a little bit lower in the utilities pane. The first part you see are settings that are specific to our label, such as the text. You see, you can change it here as well. Hello me, for instance, you see, changes here as well. You also see something interesting. If I change it here, the text doesn't really fit anymore, and I have to use this thing over here to actually change the size. Whereas when I change it here, hello everybody, the label is resized automatically, one of those small things that Xcode does for you or doesn't do for you. You can also change the color by, well, you can change the gray, for instance. Text changes immediately. I can undo stuff by pressing Command Z, as you probably expected, to put it back. And I can do many more things. I can change the font, I can change the alignment, etc., etc. This is what you all do in the utilities part. Now back to this text here, this label. I can drag it over the screen to place it somewhere. You see this line appearing there, which means that I've actually centered it horizontally. And if I put it over here, a little bit lower, 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 now I've centered it vertically and horizontally. Now that's all nice and well, but look what happens if we stop our app. The app is still running in the simulator, as you can see. I pressed Command Tab to go there. But if I now stop the app in the simulator and run it again, effectively building it again, because I now changed it with this label, you'll see something very interesting. The text is centered over here, but it's not centered in our app. Do you see this? Look, it's not even centered here. What on earth is happening here? This is causing problems for everyone. Everyone I know who start building their own apps is confused by this. Why doesn't it happen the way it should be happening? And if I change it here, if I drag my text a little bit to the left, and if I build my app again, stopping it first, starting it again, Command period and Command R, look, now it's kind of centered, but if I rotate my screen by pressing Command arrow right, still not on the right place. Why is this? Well, this has to do with a very, very nifty piece of functionality built in into Xcode called auto layout. And auto layout allows you to build screens that work on every device, on an iPhone 6, on an iPhone 4, an iPhone 5. As you know, they all have different screen sizes. And you don't need to build different screens for each and every one of those devices. No, you build one screen. You can build more if you want to, but you don't need to. You build one screen, and as opposed to saying, listen, I want to have this so and so many pixels from the left and so many pixels from the top, you simply say to Xcode, using this auto layout system, I want to have this label centered. And then it will be centered on every device. I'll give you an example right now. We'll center this label, and these guidelines don't center the label themselves, they just tell you where the label is when it's centered. So now it's centered. And this makes it easy for us to now center the label using auto layout. And it works like this. You click on the label once. There's a few ways to do this. I'll show you the easy way first. Here in the editor, there's this align option here. And you see what you can do. There's two options here. Up. Horizontal center in container. Container is this main view. We've put this label in. And vertical center in container. You see? If we select the main view, and I look to the editor menu, I can't select those two because this is the container. You can't center the container in itself. There's no use in doing that. It's not practical. So those options are only available if you work with views that are inside another view, like this one is. So editor, align, horizontal centering container, vertical centering container. That's one thing, one way to do this. There's another way to do this. I can also drag with the right mouse button pressed. I can drag from this label view to its container view, its parent view. And if I now let go of my right mouse button, I get this option. See, I can do many more things. And here they are, center horizontally in container, center vertically in container. I'll click on this one to center it horizontally first. That's now done. And I'll do it again. I'll click and drag with my right mouse button pressed, or control dragging. And now I can select this one. There you go. Now, nothing has changed. At least it looks that way. But look what happens if we now build our app again and run it again by pressing Command R. There you go. This we had already, but now it's centered. You see? It's centered very nicely. And the interesting thing is, if you now would run, why don't we do that? If you now run our app on a simulated iPhone 4, you'll see everything is centered as well. And the way to do that is as follows. Here you see the so-called target of your app, the scheme we're using. The scheme contains a number of instructions that Xcode uses to build apps. And we can now tell Xcode to build our app for an iPhone 4S, for instance, just like this. And if we now press the button, the play button, or press Command R to build the app again, we'll see a different version of the simulator in action. We'll see an iPhone 4S. There we go. You see a screen which is a lot smaller than our iPhone 6 screen, but look at the text. It's still centered. All of this because we used auto layout to tell Xcode to center this. And you see this auto layout is basically nothing else but a set of, well, you'd almost call it definitions. Center something compared to its container. And you can actually see what auto layout did or created. Two constraints. Look, here they are, center alignment and center alignment, center X and center Y, all for this label. Now you can use auto layout to center stuff. You can also use auto layout to position items, views, with regards to other views. For instance, we are now going to put a button on the screen, which we want to have centered horizontally. And vertically, we want to have this button at the ideal distance to our label. And we're going to use those guidelines again, just like we did before. You see the horizontal guide or the vertical guideline telling us that we have centered horizontally. Like a little bit confusing, but look what happens now. It tells you exactly. You see this one? It tells you this is the ideal position compared to the label, and this is on the right side, justified. But we want to center this button. Now we want to put it as set as at the ideal distance from the label, the distance that Apple considers ideal. And you get there by displaying those dotted lines. Again, we don't have any constraints yet. There's no auto layout in place yet for this button. You can see that if we stop our app and we build it again, look where the button ends up. It's always interesting to see these things because, as I said, this leads to lots of confusion at people who start to get to know Xcode and building up. See where the button lands over there, and if we turn our iPhone 4 simulator screen, it's even gone. You see it? It's somewhere there at the bottom, but it disappears. Why? There's no auto layout in place yet. We're going to change that right now. Firstly, we're going to center this button compared to its container view horizontally. That's easy. You can drag, right drag from here to there. You can also right drag. You see here's the button. It's also a sub view of this main view. You can also right drag from here to there. Look, right mouse button pressed. I'm dragging here. Let it go and I say center horizontally. Now we have one constraint in place. But look what happens. We're not done yet. We didn't tell Xcode yet what the vertical position of this button is. And Xcode gets alarmed right away. This is a warning sign here. This is bad news. This means that Xcode doesn't have, well, basically Xcode tells you that it can build the app for you, but it's by no means certain what the result will be. And you'd better not have any apps that you submit to the App Store or give to other people that have warnings in them, because it means that something is wrong. You will always want to fix those warnings, and effectively that means that this panel here should always have no triangles. The yellow ones are warnings, the red ones are more serious. If there's a red one here, Xcode tells you that it can't even build your app, it can't even run it. You need to fix the errors first. Yellow ones, as I said, Xcode will still build your app. The results are totally unpredictable very often. And in this case, there's a red circle here. You see this in this outline. And a warning in combination with a red circle here means that auto layout has a problem. Something is wrong. And you can see what the problem is by clicking on this small circle. And Xcode tells you that a constraint is missing. There is no Y position constraint for our button. It also tells you, but this is a warning, again this is yellow, this button is misplaced. The view is misplaced. According to Xcode, knowing what it knows right now, that is no Y position, this button should be there and not there. Now you don't want to change this, why would you? You don't want to correct this warning, because Xcode has no clue what the Y position should be. So we need to change that first. Now, as said, we want to have this Y position at the ideal distance to this label, and that's actually very easy to do. You keep your right mouse button pressed and drag from the button to this thing, to this label. Let go, and there you go. Vertical spacing, it's the first one. You can also do it another way. You click on the button, and there's another option, other way to do this over here. There's 3 icons. The middle one is the so-called pin icon. If you press this, you get this nice visual way of adding constraints. And this is the one we're looking at. If you now click this to switch it on, you can either use a value, a so-called magic number, the number 8, but you can also say, no, I want to use the standard value, which is the value that Apple recommends, to define the distance between this button and what's immediately above it, which is our label. And now we just add the constraint like this and done. And within a few seconds, there it is, the warning disappears. We're done. We now have the correct auto layout constraints, as you can see when we click on the structure button over here. We now have 4 of them, you see. We have one constraint that has to do with the distance between those two. Well, there's 4 of them. I'm not going to go through all of them right now. 4 constraints, 2 for each view. And you'll see what it means when we run our app. Everything is there. Button, oh, that's the wrong direction. Button in the right place. Centered as well. On your iPhone 4, but also on an iPhone 6, as you will understand, and you can try that out yourself if you've worked with me in this video. Okay, we're now almost done. The one thing we're going to do, we're going to make this button do something, and therefore we have to use program codes. And the program code, as I told you before, can be found in the navigator. So just press Command 0 to get access to the navigator, and we'll shut down the app for now. We'll just stop it by pressing Command period. App is now stopped. And all the program code that has to do with this part of our scene, this view controller, which is everything here, is listed in this file, view controller. So this, everything here, is program code that has to do with everything here, this view controller, this one to be exact. And we actually need to start by building some connections. We need to tell Xcode how to reach this thing and this thing in code. Let's start with this hello everybody thing. We have to have a possibility to have two screens next to each other. This one and the screen where we can look at our program code. And obviously there's a way to do this. Let's create some room first. We don't need the utilities bar pane anymore, so we'll hide that by pressing Command-Alt-0. It's now gone. Over here you find 3 buttons that have to do with the Xcode editors. This is the active one, the standard editor. This is an interesting one. This is the assistant editor. Once you press it, Xcode will then try to find out what another file could be, here in this list, that is relevant to what we're looking at right now. And in this case, we're looking at a storyboard. Particularly, we're looking at a specific view controller. By pressing this button, Xcode will, display the contents of this file. So we now have two things that belong to each other right next to each other. And now we can start to create links, because we want to be able to process button clicks, or taps actually, by writing program code. And we also want to be able to change the text that's written here from program code. Let's start with that text. This text is displayed by a label. And we now will make a connection between this label over here and our program code by control clicking, or click on the right mouse button and drag over here. Let's put it over here. Let go of the right mouse button, and now we have our connection almost in place. We only have to give it a name. Let's call it my label, since it's actually the label. And there it is. I'll create some extra space. This line tells Xcode, you see here, outlet. It tells Xcode that our program code now has a direct connection to this label. We can do with this label whatever we want. We'll see that a little bit later. We also have to create another kind of connection. We want to have an action performed once the user taps on this button. So we are also going to right drag from this button, so press the right mouse button and drag from here to, let's say, here. Once you let go, we are now not going to create a normal outlet, but an action. And we basically tell our program code, or Xcode, that once the user taps this button, this action, let's call it change label text, needs to be performed. Look what happens once I press connect. So don't forget to select action over here. Connect, there you go. A function is added. So this function is linked, and I'll tell you what a function is a little bit later. This stuff here is linked to that button. And this thing is linked to our label. We can now access our label from program code, and we can action on any button taps from within our program code. We no longer need this assistant editor. You can close it by either selecting the standard editor, or you can use the short key for this, which is Command-Enter. And to get the assistant editor back, by the way, you press Command-Alt-Enter. So now you switch between both of them, and now we switch back to our standard editor. Now we select our program code. Here we go. We only need to do one more thing. We need to change the text on the label once the user taps the button, and that's done by writing one single line of program code here on this line. And if you remember, when we looked at a storyboard and we looked at our label, I'll switch on the utilities pane for a few moments. There you go. If you look at our label, we had this text setting over here, you see? A type and the text itself, and we now put hello everybody over there. We could have put everything over there. If I change it here, it will be changing here as well. This is the text property, the text setting. Settings are called property in iOS and Xcode language. Now, I already told you that we can change this property in the storyboard, and we can also change it in program code, and that's exactly what we're going to do right now in our view controller. So we already know the name of the property is text. We also know how we can connect to our label in program code. That we do that by using this name. So what we do is the following. We type my label. You see it's there already. Now press tab to have Xcode auto-fill it for you. You see what happens right now? Here's a red error. Why? Because we're not done yet. This is not correct programming code. So we can't even run our app right now. Let's see if I start doing it anyway by pressing Command R or pressing here, clicking on the play button. Nothing will happen. Failed. You see, the expression resolves to an unused L value. In other words, Xcode doesn't know what to do. No wonder, because we're not done yet. This line is not complete. As said, my label is the name of our label, the name we gave to our label when connecting it. How do we get to this specific setting? We start by entering a period. There you go. And now you get a whole list of settings, all kinds of things you can change. And as you probably guessed, the setting that has to do with the label text is text. There you go. Another tab to have Xcode fill it in for us automatically. And now we only have to add the new text we want to be placed on that label once we have the user click the button. That text is being put between double quotes. And there we go. And let's put the domain name of the App Builders Academy there. appbuildersacademy.com. That's it. That's all there's to it. Now let's see if this works by pressing Command R again. I press the button and there you go. Text is changed. Why? Because this line of code has been executed. Now if I press the button again, the code will be executed once more. However, you don't see any results because the text has already been changed. But Xcode or iOS in the background will change the label text again, even though it doesn't show. That's it, your first app using Xcode. You've seen how the Storyboard works. We've also seen some Xcode panes in action, and we've actually created connections between the Storyboard and program code. Now, if you are interested in learning more about how app building works, I'd advise you to join the App Builders Academy. It's free, and you'll receive a 50-page starter's guide, which tells you everything you need to know on how to build apps with Xcode. It goes into more detail on building Xcode screens with the Storyboard, using auto layout, creating labels and buttons, etc. I hope you liked this video. Looking forward to seeing you again in future videos where I will be discussing more elements of building apps in Xcode. Until then, good luck in building your own apps.